Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with another Anabolic Q&A. I got some great questions on deck today from my Anabolic Bodybuilding School members site. We have a question about the hot topic of the day, the sugar diet, and what my thoughts are on it, and if I've had any experience with it with my clients yet. Does pre-workout Cialis have any sort of contradiction with pre-workout drinks? Does it cause problems? Does Letrozole help getting hard and fat-free at the end of contest prep? I have a question about the new class of GLP-1s that have myostatin inhibitors included with them, what my thoughts are on those, and are those the future of GLP-1s? What causes post-injection pain, and many more questions. As I mentioned before, all these questions come from my school Anabolic Bodybuilding members site. You can join the site yourself. Members get priority questions answered on the weekly Q&As. You can join for $30 a month. I also check the school members site daily to answer questions for members. It's super cheap. It's only $30 a month. Great deal. I have some free coursework over there too on the blast and cruise methodology, insulin use, and some other things, peptides, etc., in the classroom section of the school member site. I think you're going to really enjoy it. We have a great group of people over there, 100 plus members at this point. It is a fantastic community. Link is in the video description below if you want to go over there and join today. Anyway, enough of that, and we'll get started with the Q&A in just 1 second. All right, first question I have here is from Mr. Mark Swanson. Mark asks, okay, let's talk about the sugar diet. Anybody seen any glucose numbers from people that are doing this? I have not personally seen glucose numbers yet. I do have a client that has volunteered to try the diet and wear a CGM and report his results. He's been on the diet for 2 weeks now, dropped something like close to 10 pounds already. Now, I don't know how much of that was actually lean body mass, how much of that was muscle, how much of it was water. We don't really know. He's reported no loss in strength as of yet. He is going to track his CGM results and also report back to me about strength and get some blood panels done at the end of it. We'll see if there's any increase in A1C. I would try it myself, but I'm a diabetic, probably not too smart for me to try it. Now, here's the thing with the sugar diet, and this is the part that kind of makes me laugh a little bit. If you go back and look at my social media posts and my stuff about carb cycling, I have been doing this for 10 years or close to 10 years. That's essentially the principle of carb cycling. We pick 1 to 2 days a week where we push the carbohydrates super high. I do a lot of glucose. I do a lot of fructose. And half the carbohydrates come from starchy carbs. The other half come from simple sugars. And we keep the protein low and we keep the fat as close to zero as possible. So I've already been doing a version of this for a long time. It's just got a different name now. Now there's multiple reasons why we do this. And I'm going to explain how the sugar diet works and how the high carbohydrates days work within a carb cycling diet. Part of the effect that you get from it is increased mitochondrial function. And this also boosts metabolism and increases glycogen synthesis. And we know that glycogen is important for performance in the gym. Not a big mystery there. And this is why you can put it to test. And guys do low carbohydrate diets, and you'll see an immediate decrease in performance in the gym. You'll notice that rep count goes down because lifting weights is really a glucose intensive activity. Your body's going to use glucose as the primary fuel for working out. It's not to say you can't lift weights without glucose present. Certainly people do it with keto diets and carnivore diets and things like that, but performance is not going to be optimal. Your body has a built-in storage system where it can store a shit ton of glucose that can be immediately used for exercise purposes. The glycogen stores in the muscle. A big guy like me, I can easily store 1,000 plus grams of carbohydrates as glycogen. The average person, I think it's somewhere around 500 grams or so, the non-trained person in muscle glycogen. There's also the added effect of having increased insulin present while you have this, which is going to increase mTOR, lower AMPK, and all the different things that are important for signaling muscle growth. IGF-1 probably increases. There's a ton of other glycogen synthesis increases. There's a bunch of other things that happen when you're in this state as well. We also reduce protein on the high carbohydrate days because carbohydrates are protein sparing. And what we mean by protein sparing is that there is no risk of gluconeogenesis when you're in a high carbohydrate state. So you can really take your protein intake down to very minimal. I could probably even go even lower than what we do on the high carbohydrate days. You could probably get away with next to nothing. The guys that are doing the sugar diet are having very minimal, probably less than 50 to 150 grams of protein throughout the day. It's some guys I think are doing nothing as far as protein goes. In theory, the sugar diet, when you keep the protein low and the fat as close to zero as possible and you have high sugar, it's going to increase a peptide in the human body called FGF21. FGF21 is also present when you're fasting and other, it's not just the high sugar diet, but ironically, what it does is even though you're eating high sugar, it increases insulin sensitivity. Protein must be kept low for FGF21 to increase, and it increases mitochondrial function. You'll see an increase in mitochondrial biogenesis and respiration while FGF21 is present. Now, anecdotally speaking, what I have seen with the high carbohydrate days with carb cycling, what we run into is that after a while, I can keep cranking up those carbs, those simple sugars, and people's metabolisms just continue to spin up and get faster and faster and faster. I've replicated this hundreds of times with clients where we've gotten their metabolisms ramped up. You'll see an increase in metabolism with people where they're, we'll get them up to eating, 1,000 plus grams of carbohydrates with no noticeable fat gain, and their body composition just continues to improve. Now, this is not the case with everybody. You need to be metabolically healthy. If you're someone that struggles with insulin resistance, etc., it's probably not going to work. It's probably not a smart idea. I would be concerned about doing this every day, that eventually that it's going to lead to some insulin resistance and other issues. That we don't know what the long-term effects of having this go on. But I have seen you can put it to test. I mean, you can look at my contest preps. I continue to increase my food on contest preps on the high days. My metabolism just picks up and picks up and picks up. Now, not everybody experiences this effect. I think there is some unique variability in your physiology that affects it, but I have seen that. And that's essentially what this is. It's just, it makes me laugh because the bros that are doing it now are the same dudes that were doing the keto diets and carnivore diets. They love to do extremes. We've been doing this forever in bodybuilding with carb cycling. The key, though, is to keep the proteins low, and the fats need to be as close to zero as you can humanly make them. Any fats that are present during this, when you're in a high carbohydrate state, when you're getting a bunch of simple sugars in, you're going to have a high insulin state. Those fats are likely going to be just stored as body fat. Your body's going to be prioritizing glucose as a fuel source, and it's going to disrupt this entire process and just make it pointless. It's not going to work. You're just going to get fat. And we see that with people. Also, for those of us that are in bodybuilding that are using PEDs, growth hormone and insulin probably, and the other PEDs that we use are going to enhance the effect. I know the science bros are going to come out of the woodwork and say it doesn't work. I've experienced otherwise. All right, next question we have here is from Adam A. Hey, Paul, question. Can I take a pre-workout and tadalafil, a.k.a. Cialis, together before my workout, or just one or the other? I heard there may be some negative interactions. Well, there's no real benefit for taking Cialis pre-workouts per se because it's a very long half-life. If you take it, it's going to be present for a long time. It takes a while for it to peak. And yes, there are some possible interactions with pre-workouts and Cialis. So let's think about this. Cialis increases nitric oxide production and is also a vasodilator. Cialis can cause acute drops in blood pressure. Now, if you're using a pre-workout that has a pump enhancer in it, something, there's things like yohimbine and citrulline and all these other things that are going to cause, other agents that could potentially cause vasodilation. It is possible that you could have an experience where your blood pressure could drop and where you would be hypotensive and potentially pass out, get lightheaded. I have had experiences where I've messed around with Cialis in the past and used pre-workouts, and I've gotten lightheaded, also with clenbuterol, and gotten lightheaded. And, it's not to say that's going to happen to everybody. I think you're most likely going to be safe, but it's something to be aware of. I know dudes love taking Cialis as a pre-workout. It really, to me, like if you're going to run Cialis, something like an every other day dosing schedule, it's probably prudent. I don't know that the whole taking a pre-workout does a whole lot. I have not noticed any difference in my workout taking Cialis. If you wanted something that's going to hit quick and potentially have benefits pre-workout, maybe Viagra would be a better choice for that. I mean, they're both similar classes of drugs. Now that I think about it, I think Cialis's half-life is a little bit shorter. I think it's active for up to 36 hours. I think it's something like 17, 18 hours. Viagra has a very short half-life and is effective and active very quickly. So Viagra would probably be a better choice for pre-workout if that's what you're looking for. You just don't want to be walking around the gym with boners. I honestly, I've never noticed that it makes much of a difference in my workout. If you want a big pump in your workout, just use a pre-workout and just actually do some work in the gym. Eat some carbs. If you want a great pump, eat some carbs. Take a little Humalog. You'll get a great pump. I'm just joking about the Humalog. Most people are too stupid to take insulin. It's probably a dumb idea. But anyway, hopefully this answers your question. All right, next question is from my friend Scott Mislinski. Scott asked, hey, Paul, have you ever used Letrozole with a client in prep or yourself? How did you use it and how did you leverage it versus other AIs or with other AIs in place? Yes, I have used Letrozole on contest prep. I do have my clients use Letrozole on contest prep. I tend to save it for the very end, like the last week, 7 to 10 days. Letrozole is the nuclear bomb of AIs. It is highly suppressive of estrogen. It has something like a 98% effectiveness when it comes to reducing estradiol with as low as a 2.5 milligram dose. I know in breast cancer treatment, they prescribe between 2.5 to 5 milligrams, somewhere in that range, but 2.5 milligrams a day for that last 7 to 10 days going into a show will get you dry as fuck, is what I've seen. Now, you'll have the guys, there's the science-based crowd that say that, estrogen's necessary for fat burning and that you don't need to smash your estrogen going into a contest. And this is one where the bro science seems to win out. I have tried it both ways, and everybody that gets super dry, super hard, super peeled on stage goes hard with the AIs at the end. It's just, I know there are some outliers. I would love to talk to John Jewett about it at some point. I know John doesn't, from what I understand, doesn't smash his estrogen, and he looks great on stage. I just have not found that works for me. If I want to get super dry, I smash the estrogen at the end. And a lot of the old school bodybuilders would run multiple AIs or run double doses of AIs at the end. There are some stubborn estrogenic fat deposits that happen on the body, such as the glutes, lower back, lower abdomen, hamstrings, that sometimes you just can't get hard in those areas until you smash the estrogen. And we have to remember that estrogen does promote lipogenesis, fat storage, and there are, and then some people seem to be more prone to estrogenic fat deposition patterns. You'll see the dudes that have fat on their hips and on their ass, on their inner thighs and things like that, where it is very estrogenic. And I can almost look at a guy when I take on a client and know that somebody has high estrogen just by looking at how they hold fat. I will tell you this, the dudes that leave their estrogen high or higher going into the shows almost never look hard. I can tell you with certainty that they just don't get hard and chiseled on stage. But look, here's my thing. Save it for the end. Save it for when you need it. You don't want to feel like dog shit. When you smash your estrogen, you certainly feel horrible. Your joints feel horrible. Energy goes to shit. Sex drive goes away completely. It is not a pleasant feeling having your estrogen smashed, but I do think it is something that's necessary if you want that hard, grainy, just gnarly look on stage. I just have not seen people do it without it. And Letrozole is the most effective tool for doing it. Not Exemestane, not Arimidex. Arimidex is fine. But Letrozole, to me, is the most effective tool. It will smash your estrogen harder than anything else. Also make you feel shittier than anything else. And we're only talking about maybe a couple weeks where we're, 10 days, 14 days, something like that going into the show where we're just getting ourselves hard as a rock. And you're going to feel like crap going into that last week anyway. That's what I've seen. This is just bodybuilding, bro science anecdote. I know the science nerds are going to say, no, you don't need to do that. Those are also the people that usually don't look hard on stage. I know there are some exceptions to every rule. There are guys that get hard without smashing their estrogen. There are probably guys that were never high estrogen converters to begin with. There's some people that are high estrogen converters and have those problems. I just have not seen it work otherwise. All right, next question here is from Scott Brinkman. He's got kind of a two-parter here about bringing up hamstrings. Scott asked, if you wanted to specialize in bringing up your hamstrings, what exercise would you perform and how frequently? How would you explain to execute the hamstring drop from the side chest and the side tricep mandatory poses as well? All right, so this one is one to unpack. I definitely have struggled with my hamstring growth. I brought my hamstrings up pretty significantly for my last show. That was an area that I improved and I focused on. I will say this, I didn't really bring my hamstrings up until I had a dedicated hamstring day. I separated my hamstrings and adductors out from my quad training. This is the thing with leg training that always kind of perplexes me is you split your upper body into multiple days. Guys will do a shoulder day. Guys will do a tricep and bicep arms day. Guys will do a back day. They'll even sometimes split back up into multiple days, do a width and a, width and then a thickness day. I've seen guys split the back up, but then they try to smash the entire legs in one day. And there's multiple muscles in your legs. Like you have the quadriceps, which are group of 4 muscles. There's the adductors. There's multiple muscles in that. Hamstrings. You have glutes as well. So I tend to group calves. So I tend to split legs up, and I find that leg development improved when I did that, where I will have a day where I do my quadricep training, and then more specifically where you can split up the quadricep training, where I will work the vastus medialis with something like leg extension so you can get that teardrop. Do some leg presses or leg, hack squats with a narrow grip so I can get the outer sweep, or, a narrow stance, toes forward kind of stance where I can get that sweep. I will do adductor training where I do stuff like goblet squats and whatnot. And then for hamstrings, what I found with hamstrings, you need to hit them with both curling movements and some sort of hip hinge. If you're not doing both, you're not going to have full hamstring development. So you need some sort of curling movement and some sort of hip hinge movement. What I like to do personally, I find seated leg curls to be the most effective leg curl movement. I get the most activation from those. And then I like to do dumbbell stiff-legged deadlifts. You don't need a shit ton of weight. I think dudes do too much weight with their stiff-legged deadlifts. And you can go back and look at some videos. John Meadows had some really good stuff on how to do stiff-legged deadlifts and really activate your hamstrings. I really had a hard time activating and connecting with my hamstrings. Doing hip hinges, I would always only feel it in my lower back. I was just activating my lower back. And when you lighten the weight up and actually really focus on your form and your technique and getting a good stretch in those muscles, the hamstrings, you will actually start to grow your hamstrings. Now, as far as the poses for getting that gnarly looking drop from the side, it is counterintuitive, but when you flex your hamstring from the side shots, you actually make your hamstring look smaller. And it's really hard to do because when the side shots, the side chest and the side tricep, what you really want to do is let your hamstring relax, and it needs to press against the adductor on the inside of the opposite leg. You use that adductor to smash that hamstring out and to make it drop and look even more. Get a little bit of a bend in that outside leg, not too much, but you want a bit of a bend in that outside leg. And what I found is by kicking my heel out, if I take my heel and turn my heel out on that outside leg, it presents the hamstring even more, where you see more of the hamstring drop in depth. And it also helps you relax that and flexes the glute at the same time. That's the part that's really fucking hard, is you need to let your hamstring relax. You need to flex your calves and you need to flex your glute. And to do all of that at the same time is really challenging to do all that. Now, from the rear shots, it's the opposite. You need to flex the hamstrings to get that piano wire look from the back. We're not trying to get a drop from the back because we're presenting our hamstrings at a direct on view to the judges. And I see this at local shows. I was just at the DC Pro-Am this weekend, and most of the dudes there didn't flex their hamstrings from the back. Sorry, guys. I know it's a local show. Don't mean to bash on the competitors, but dudes, they'll see dudes that don't flex their hamstrings and don't flex their glutes from the rear poses. And then it looks like they're not in condition when they actually are in condition, because they haven't flexed their glutes, they haven't flexed their hamstrings, and they're not presenting it to the judges to make it appear as though, so the judges can see what is actually there. I think I heard Steve Weinberger, head IFBB judge, mention, judging legend in the IFBB one time, that he can only judge what he can see. So if you do not present your physique properly, he can't judge it properly. So that's on you to present it properly. So it's the exact opposite from the rear shots. You want to flex the hamstrings. From the side shots, you want to relax them and let them drop. It takes a shit ton of practice. And this is another thing I will tell dudes. I don't know why it doesn't compute with new competitors, that you have got to start practicing posing early. In fact, you probably should be doing it every day if you want to be a bodybuilder. It blows my mind that guys think bodybuilding is just about lifting weights and meal prepping. They completely forget about posing and presentation. Completely. It's just something that they don't, and then they're practicing 2 weeks out from the show, and they look like ass when they get on stage because they put zero work into their posing and presentation. And it doesn't matter how shredded, how big you are, if you can't present your physique, you probably aren't going to win. Now, there have been exceptions. There's some dudes on the pro stage that have just been able to overwhelm the stage with their pure size. But those guys are genetic anomalies. A guy that comes to mind, and I feel like I'm bashing him. I hope he doesn't. He knows I'm not bashing him. I say this with all the love in the world. But Andrew Jack, goddamn, that guy cannot pose, and he's losing shows. He's losing placings because of his shitty posing. And if he could get his posing together, he would place higher, maybe win shows. He probably could win some shows that he has not won because of just his posing. It's a shame because the guy has an amazing physique. There's other dudes. Then there's guys that are just artists with their posing, and then they win shows because of how great they can compose. Like you think of a guy like Terrence Ruffin, not the biggest dude. He's not very big, but Terrence just is a tactician on stage with how he poses. He knows how to present his physique perfectly. Chris Bumstead is another one, and classic. Chris just knows how to present his physique. If you actually met Chris and see him up close, I'm not saying he's small, but he's not like Samson big. I mean, he's not the biggest dude, but he proved that he could get on stage with the open guys, and because of his presentation, because of his polish and everything, that he can hang with the big dudes in the open. And that's because he knows how to present his physique. He's just brilliant at it. So control all the variables you can control. You can control your condition. You can control how you present your physique. Sorry to get off track with this one, but this is just like a pet peeve of mine. And I know this was about hamstring drop and presenting your hamstrings, but it all factors into the art of being a great bodybuilder. Know how to present your physique, and working on your hamstring drop and how to present your hamstrings from different positions is an important aspect of that. Dustin Mariner asks, would you say insulin is the most game-changing anabolic if it's used right, or is there something even more powerful? No, I would say insulin is not the most game-changing anabolic. In fact, I would say it's not really that big of a deal, to be honest with you. You can look at the physiques back in the 80s and 90s. Most of those guys were not using insulin, and they had impressive physiques. I think people started dabbling with insulin in the mid-90s. Milos Sarcev was probably the first person to do it. I mean, Dorian Yates said he just dabbled with it here and there, and he never used it until he'd already won the Mr. Olympia title. And one could argue that Dorian could hang with the best of the guys now. And I know there are coaches, like I've heard Hani Rambod say that he does not like insulin. I don't know if he runs it with his guys. Who knows what these guys do behind the scenes. I know Milos loves insulin. It is a tool in the toolbox, but no, I do not think it's game-changing. I have not seen guys transform their physiques by just adding insulin in. It's the basics that cause the biggest changes. We can look back at when physiques changed in the history of bodybuilding. If we go all the way back to the beginning, you'll see, there's guys that were probably natural or just using maybe a little bit of testosterone. And then dudes started using synthetic AASs like D-Bol and Winstrol and Primobolan and things like that. And then there was a giant leap forward in physiques on stage in the 70s from what dudes looked like before, and guys were... clearly you could see when dudes were using D-Bol and Anavar and Winstrol and Primobolan. Those were the primary anabolics that guys used in the 70s. And then there wasn't another huge step forward in physiques until growth hormone hit the scene. And then in the 90s, when growth hormone hit the scene, when you had potential hyperplasia on top of the hypertrophy that is from using the AASs, you had another pathway that was addressed with using growth hormone. Then there was another huge leap forward in physiques sizes. Now, we could argue that growth hormone and insulin are sort of like peanut butter and jelly. There is some truth to that. Guys, I think, got too carried away with the insulin in the early 2000s, and then you saw all the distended guts there for a while from dudes power shoving food and probably getting a little too carried away from the insulin. And from what I've seen with the dudes in the modern world of bodybuilding, they've sort of backed off the insulin a bit. I know like a lot of guys are carb cycling where you might only run insulin a couple days a week, but I would say for the average gym bro, it's not going to make much of a difference. Really, growth hormone testosterone, and then whatever anabolic you prefer to run with your GH and testosterone are going to be the biggest and most impactful things to transform your physique. That's what I've seen. I took a huge step forward with my development when I added growth hormone. I didn't use growth hormone, honestly, until my 40s. And I was kind of scared to use it because I was worried about cancer. And I was very conservative with my doses when I was younger. I was mostly just like test, deca, D-ball kind of guy. That's the way I was in the early 2000s. That, and in the early 2000s, growth hormone just was not that accessible for the average gym bro like it is now, and it was incredibly expensive. I know pros had access to it, but most just regular gym bros weren't using it until like the last 5-10 years, and then it has become more prevalent. But growth hormone definitely was, I would say, first the synthetic AASs, and then second would be growth hormone would be the biggest transformation tools in bodybuilding. I honestly, what I've seen with growth hormone, you can just run TRT and some growth hormone, and you can maintain a pretty large amount of mass. You pull the growth hormone out, then the size starts to go away. Growth hormone is probably the most powerful anti-catabolic that there is. Kurt Havens and I were talking about that this morning, about how just what a potent anti-catabolic it is. You can maintain, just you can go out and jog fast, whatever, and if you're running growth hormone, you can hang on to size. So I would say test whatever the synthetic anabolics and growth hormone. I wouldn't even put insulin on that list. It's sort of like the cherry on the sundae. Gives you a little bit extra, allows you to eat a little bit more food, helps with nutrient partitioning, but it's not the be-all, end-all. You can certainly get pretty massive without ever touching insulin. All right, we got another insulin question up here from Jiten Kumar. Jiten said, I heard some people talking about taking 1 unit of fast-acting insulin before morning fasted cardio for fat loss. Does this actually accelerate fat loss? That sounds like a brilliant idea, to take insulin with fasted cardio. What could possibly go wrong? Here's my opportunity to tell everybody I'm a diabetic. I know bros get annoyed when I say I'm diabetic, but I know a little bit about insulin because I've been diabetic for a long time. You are insane if you take insulin and do fasted cardio. I have gone hypo to the point where I have blacked out before. It is terrifying when it happens, man, and it hits fast. It hits hard when it comes, and it just comes out of nowhere sometimes. I would say you are insane if you do that. And plus, look, the likelihood of going hypo from 1 unit of insulin is probably pretty low. But what the hell is 1 unit of insulin going to do for fat burning? Absolutely nothing. And not only that, insulin is lipotic. It increases storage. It's not going to help with fat loss in any way. I guess the logic is that you're going to force any glucose that is in the bloodstream into storage, glycogen storage, or it's just going to get stored, and then you're going to be in a low glucose state, and you're going to force your body to burn fat. I think that's probably the bro logic that goes on there. It is just an incredibly dumb idea, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to make shit all a difference as far as getting shredded. I know where the idea came from, and it's an incredibly stupid one. I would not risk going hypo during your morning cardio, and I really don't think you're going to get any benefit from it at all, to be honest with you. I've gotten just perfectly shred it without running insulin with my fasted cardio. You don't need to do that. Not worth the risk. Not really going to benefit you in any appreciable way. Just get up and do your damn cardio. Take your fat burners that you normally take and be in a calorie deficit. That's going to be the most efficient way to burn fat. Paul Robinson asks, is there any situation where intensifiers like drop sets on your last set of a movement can add significant value to any phase of the year? Are body parts that respond better than others to drop sets, supersets, intensifiers, or it's simply just something fun to do? I would say it's in the fun to do category. If we think about this, let's unpack this and think about it logically. It's ultimately mechanical tension that causes hypertrophy, and to maximize mechanical tension, I would think that you would want the muscle as rested and to be able to move as much weight as you possibly can. When you're doing drop sets, when you're doing intensifiers, you're actually using less mechanical tension, and that probably is not going to help with hypertrophy. So if you start off doing set X with 100 pounds and you drop down to 20 pounds, what is that 20 pounds really doing for additional mechanical tension? Probably nothing would be my guess. Now, are they fun? Do I like to do them now and then? It gets you a great pump. Helps get you through a workout quicker. I do like doing that. There are some people that make the argument for the metabolic effects of having drop sets, supersets, things like that. I know Milo Sarchev he does giant sets with his clients with insulin and high carbohydrate intake. Now, there may be something to that, and we've seen his guys get huge from doing that, where if you're pushing insulin and carbohydrates, that you do get some sort of supercompensation effect with glycogen synthesis and flushing nutrients into the muscle, that maybe that can contribute to hypertrophy in some indirect way that we're not 100% sure about. But ultimately, it is mechanical tension that drives hypertrophy. So I would think that you really would want to prioritize being able to give your maximum effort 2 sets to have optimal mechanical tension for eliciting hypertrophy. That's, it's just my high level, really simplistic look at it. Look, if you want to do it for fun, it's not hurting anything. If you're in a fat loss phase and you just want to burn some extra calories, spend a little extra energy, increase your NEAT, whatever we want to call it at that point, increase energy expenditure. Why not? It's not hurting anything. I will say this: it's supersets and drop sets when it's busy in the gym, just for purposes of being polite in your gym workout, to kind of drive me nuts. I'll see guys in the gym that have 3 machines occupied at 5 p.m. when the gym is incredibly crowded, and they have their drink sitting on, the machine X while they're over on machine Y, and then I'm sitting there, I need machine X, and there's just a shaker cup on it, and I have to wait because dude's doing a superset or a giant set. I'm like, come on, bro, really? We're all trying to work out here, man, and you're occupying 3 machines. You're taking up 3 people's worth of space when the gym is crazy busy. But look, if you're not preventing other people from working out, if you wanted to add it just for something fun to do, maybe to burn a little more calories, I'll do shit like that at the end of contest prep sometimes when strength is low. And really at the end of contest prep, hypertrophy is secondary. We're not growing muscle at the end of a cutting phase. And sometimes I just want to burn some extra calories and get a little bit of a pump. Why not? That would be maybe the time that's appropriate to do it. But I would say in the off season, you're probably not getting a whole lot of benefit from it when you're in a hypertrophy phase or a growth phase. All right, next question is from Ascari Simonin. I apologize if I slaughtered that name. I think I said it correctly. Sorry, dude, if I fucked that up. Have you seen the new studies from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals regarding myostatin and activin A antagonist? Seems a bit too promising. What are your thoughts on myostatin blockers and the future of bodybuilding? Myostatin blockers have been sort of the holy grail that bodybuilders have been chasing since the 90s. I first heard them mentioned in the late 90s, and there have been a bunch of prospects over the years that absolutely did nothing, jack shit, didn't do a damn thing, didn't help at all. But I will say this, there are some promising new drugs that are coming out. I would assume, with the advent of AI and some of the new research techniques that pharmaceutical companies are using in the development of GLP-1s, that we might actually have legitimate myostatin inhibition on the horizon. Maybe. We'll see. And I understand why they're researching this stuff with the myostatin inhibition with GLP-1s. You think about it, like one of the big problems with GLP-1s is people experience muscle loss. Now, I will say this. If you're running GH, if you're running anabolics and you're lifting and you're eating a high-protein diet, you're probably not going to have muscle loss on GLP-1s. I would suspect that the people that are showing huge amounts of muscle loss on GLP-1s are probably just eating the same shitty low-protein diet, high-fat, high-carbohydrate diet that they were eating before they got on the GLP-1, not working out, but they're just eating less of it. So, of course, you're going to lose size when that happens. Now, if we think about it like the activin A and myostatin inhibition that's going to prevent muscle loss with a drug that is enhancing appetite suppression and fat loss, that is the holy grail of fat loss drugs. If they actually get this shit ironed out, imagine being able to take a drug on contest prep that reduces appetite, increases fat burning and metabolism, also protects you from muscle loss. Think about what the hell that would do on contest prep, having a drug that you're going to have increased fat loss, preservation of muscle mass, and then you throw some anabolics on top of it. It is going to be insane. You're going to be able to basically live off of cod and asparagus, get yourself shredded, not lose any muscle during the contest prep. That's crazy if it actually works in the long term. Now, I grabbed some data from the study for my notes for this Q&A, and here's what it said. It said that the lean mass preservation, semaglutide alone in the study noted that it led to an average loss of 7.9 pounds of muscle mass, accounting for 34.5% of the total weight loss. That is fucking crazy. A third of the weight that was lost running semaglutide was muscle mass. Now, like I said, it's dudes eating or people eating the same shitty low protein, high fat, high carbohydrate diet that they were eating before. Adding the activin A and the myostatin inhibitor, adding the myostatin inhibitor preserved approximately 50% of the mass, while the combination of the activin A and myostatin inhibition preserved up to 81% of muscle loss in the clinical trial. Now, so we still had some muscle loss, but it stopped the majority of it. Now, keep that in mind. Now, I don't think this is the holy grail that people think it is, where they're just going to look like the blue cow or whatever the hell that is that we see in all the pictures, the cow that doesn't have the myostatin gene that just gets huge. It doesn't seem like we're there yet, but what we may have on our hands is potential for a highly effective GLP-1 drug for fat loss that is going to preserve the majority of muscle mass while you're using it in a calorie restricted, protein restricted environment. And that seems really cool. Now, I wonder if you stack this with, anabolics, growth hormone, and potentially some other tools, high protein diet, insulin, I don't know. I'm just tossing out ideas that if you wouldn't completely eliminate muscle loss and possibly have muscle gain in a extreme deficit. We don't know yet. Well, time will tell. But in theory, these drugs sound super interesting, super fucking cool, and have a lot of potential. All right, last question here is from Adam Haley. Adam says, post-injection pain sucks, bro. It's always mentioned in the forums, but I have never seen anyone do a deep dive into it. I actually think Vigorous Steve has some stuff up about it. What's the best way to deal with post-injection pain? What causes PIP? Why can it start happening in the middle of a vial? I've never seen that happen. I don't know. It's probably just in your head, bro. How can I use the remaining supply, which I've never used, to cause PIP every single time? PIP, inflammation, swelling, literally took 6 weeks to completely disappear. There's multiple things that could be going on here, Adam. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. There's various different reasons why you get PIP. simply just using larger needles can cause damage to the tissue. I try anymore to use insulin needles to inject my gear with more than I can. Now it's really hard to get a deep depot with an insulin needle. So I have been recently been using the 1 inch or 5/8 inch insulin needles, the 28 or 29 gauge insulin needles. Backfill them with your gear, or you can even pull it out. It's just going to come out really slow. And I noticed that PIP is a lot less using these smaller needles. Injection size could be another one. If you're injecting 3 cc's of gear into a site, that certainly is going to be more painful than doing a half or a quarter. The site itself could also be an issue. If you're hitting a nerve, if you're hitting scar tissue, that also could cause a problem. The oils and the oil choice that the UGL uses is also another factor. You could be, if they're using synthetic oils and something like some ethyl oleate and some of these other things that could cause immune response, that could be a problem. Oils and solvents could cause issues. Also, higher concentrations of gear. These people love to buy the super high concentrated gear, the ones that are too so for example, the 200 milligram primobolan, or I've seen like guys get the 500 milligram testosterone. That shit is going to hurt like a motherfucker. I don't know why guys insist on doing that. That stuff, it's going to be denser. There is going to be more injection pain because of the density of the amount of gear that you're injecting. So the higher concentration of gear in the oil is going to require more solvent, likely, and is going to also cause injection pain. And then sometimes you can just gank a vein. I've seen dudes do that before, where you gank a vein and you end up with a small hematoma in the area, which is going to be painful if you're injecting an area that has a lot of vascularity. I see guys constantly having problems with injecting in their quads. I have problems with my glutes. My glutes are super vascular for some reason, and I always seem to fucking pop a vein in my glutes, and then I have these painful injections. There could also be, if you have a long-term pain in a lump, it could have just been an infection. It's possible that you had an abscess too. Another thing to consider. So there's multiple factors there. Rotating injection sites. I know dudes love to use the same injection site over and over and over and over again. That oil takes a while to dissipate from the depot under the skin. If you just keep injecting the same place over and over and over again, you're going to have fucking problems. So rotate injection sites. I wouldn't inject the same site more than once a week. Allow time for that oil to dissipate, and if you could rotate even more, that would be good. I try to, usually what I'll do is delt, glute, quad. Sometimes I do my tricep. So I have, potentially, there I would have 8 different injection sites. So if I'm injecting every day, that would be once every 9th day or 9th day, I guess, I would be injecting the same site. So I am giving that site time for inflammation to come down and allow it to recover. So these are all things to consider. There's multiple reasons why you could have injection pain, and those are all the factors that I think could potentially contribute to it. All right, folks, that's all I've got for you on this one. Hopefully this was helpful. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you have comments, leave them in the comments section below. If you think I'm an idiot, I'd love to hear why. Anyway, I love each and every one of you, even the trolls, even the guys that think I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I love you too. You're amazing. Appreciate each and every one of you. See you guys on the next episode. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.